Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Millennial Up Podcast. This is Andy, your host. And today, again, we have Alan coming back to join us.
What's up, everybody? Back again, ready to talk more about life, living, work, all that good stuff.
Yeah, Alan, can you give a little intro about yourself for people who are coming to listen for the first time?
So I am a entrepreneur, mostly photographer and videographer. I have my own video production company called Firelight Productions. I started it about 3 years ago, and I've built it from literally nothing. I mean, the first time I even picked up a camera, I remember just going on Facebook, putting out ads saying, hey, couples, who wants to shoot? I'll do it for lunch. And now we are a full running production company, and there's a team of 7, and it's been quite a journey. But coming back here, we're going to be talking more about kind of ideas and just like philosophies that come when you're kind of on this journey. And Andy, for instance, I know that you are not only an entrepreneur yourself, but you also have a full-time job as an engineer.
Yeah, I work as a civil engineer. I'm a licensed civil engineer in the state of California. Been doing it since I got out of school. I graduated 2014. It's 2019 now, so coming up on 5 years. I've been doing photography for about 10 and picked up video last year through the help of Alan. We met on a wedding job, just happened to meet each other and just happened to go to the same school, and we just connected, and we stayed in touch since.
Yeah, weddings bring people together.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's more than just the bride and groom. Sometimes the people just hooking up. Yeah. So today, our topic is about mindset. Alan brought up this topic. The overall theme will be called scarcity versus growth mindset. And Al, you mentioned a book that really talks about this, right?
Yes, you'll hear this a lot in the self-development field. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And basically, it's kind of a book about this young guy, Robert Kiyosaki, the author. He talks about his experience growing up in a family where he had 2 dads, and one dad was wealthier and the other one was poor. And he kind of describes his experience with those 2 mindsets that he grew up with.
Okay, so I didn't read the full book. I've heard of the book before. It's used in self-development. Like a lot of people in this field of trying to better themselves and better their lives, they reference this book a lot. I read the Spark Notes the other night, and it seems very interesting. It's a book that I'm going to sit down and read fully. And on the outset, just looking at the summary, I do agree with a lot of the concepts. Having the 2 dads, having 2 different perspectives on life, like the scarcity versus the growth mindset. I feel like the scarcity mindset is the way of old. My dad really thinks this way. Just kind of make enough. The world has a lot out there, but in our little slice of the world, we're just gonna make enough and get by, and try not to ruffle too many feathers, and just don't cause trouble. Just make enough and be happy with what you have.
Yeah, and just to kind of elaborate on what Andy's talking about a little bit more, this whole like scarcity and abundance mindset, it really comes from something that you probably see in your own life. Like you may have friends that are just go-getters wanting to just get more. And you have friends who are coasting by, content with life, just, relaxing, happy with their normal 9-to-5 job. A lot of these entrepreneur types are going to be more in the abundance side mindset, mainly because they are trying to create and build big businesses, inventions, or whatever it may be. It's interesting to note that in this kind of thinking, that for me at least, my mom was what you would quote the rich dad. So by rich dad, she had the abundance mindset, and she was always building business. She was always active within her community. She just loved going out and just being active. It's not to say that if you're not active, you don't love being part of the community or whatnot. But I also had my dad, who was quite the opposite. For him, what he'd like to do was, I think he made about $50,000 a year, and he loved just kind of being where he was at. For him, it was just more about how can I maximize the $50,000 that I'm making and just live my life that way. Whereas my mom was, how can I improve from this year and make more next year? And by having that abundance mindset, I didn't really notice the differences until I started to get older. I'm 27 now, and just kind of watching my parents grow up, ironically, while I'm growing up, I can say that my dad is still relatively in the same place that he was when I was a young child at like 8, if I can remember that far back. And my mom right now, she owns 5 businesses. She put 2 kids through college. You know, she did a lot. And maybe the reason why I'm telling you this is because it's not to say that it's bad to just want to coast, but I know that with my dad, there was always this like tinge of regret in his voice on things that he could have done and he would have done. He talks a lot about wanting the ability to be able to travel. You know, he got stuck in his 9 to 5, making 50,000, not really just paying off mortgages, not being able to plan and get more. While my mom was able to really work the hustle, and she's been all over the world. She's seen so many things, had so many experiences. I'm curious for you, Andy, what is your experience like kind of with this abundance and scarcity mindset?
Yeah. So growing up as a kid, you just know your parents as your parents. You don't really differentiate them. You don't see them as different personalities. Your mom and your dad, they're like your parents, like kind of like a group. When growing up, my dad has very similar to your dad. He just wanted to make enough, and he didn't really think about expanding on how much he earned. He just would try to maximize how much he earned. And that is pretty true. If I think back to how much my dad was making back then and how much my dad is making now, it's pretty similar. He's worked the same kind of jobs. He knows the same kind of people. He's gotten better at his job, and he's able to negotiate like better hours. But in terms of take home pay, it's about the same. And my dad was able to get my sister and I through college, but a lot of it had to do with just government benefits because we're such low income. My dad did not make 50,000. I don't know how much he makes, but it's like really freaking low. Mm-hmm. So which ends up becoming my motivation to do my career job and my entrepreneurship journey. But I do find value in the way that he thinks about things and the way he raised me. He taught me a lot of virtues, foundation, and just really understanding that money comes from somewhere. Like he taught me the value of a dollar, and I just expanded upon it. So if I didn't know the value of a dollar, maybe I wouldn't appreciate it as I grew older and as I worked through my career and as I worked through becoming an entrepreneur. But seeing how much emphasis he put on every single dollar and not to spend on frivolous things and to focus on spending the things that are, one, necessary, or two, make us truly happy. He really likes eating out at seafood restaurants. So that's something we do together as a family, and we will spend a little bit more money on that. We don't do that on a regular basis, but I do find value in the time that we go to celebrate like a birthday or a holiday or Christmas or Thanksgiving and go to a Chinese restaurant, spend a little bit more money because it's worth it to us. But from that, he didn't want me to just be making the same amount of money he does. I think he makes something like $10 an hour being a grocery manager in Garden Grove. And I know that living in Southern California, you can't really do much with that.
Yeah, so, I mean, rent is like ridiculous these days.
Yeah, like you're in this condo that I rent, and it's nearing $2,000 just for essentially one bedroom, and that's insane. But for me, I find value in having this place because what we're sitting in is my living room, but it is so large and there's so much white like walls that it is essentially my studio. So it's an investment of my money and I find purpose in it. So I do spend a little bit more money there. But in terms of like the idea of a rich dad, I didn't really have like a rich dad. My mom, she was really bad with money, so we're not going to talk about her in this podcast. But when I picked up, when I started watching some of Gary Vee's content, at first, like many people, when you see Gary Vee's content, you're like, who is this guy? Why is he yelling at me? And why is he telling me what to do? But after one video, it became two, and I still hated him. I was like, this guy's annoying. But I let it sit. And a few weeks later, I came back. I ended up seeing his video again, and then it clicked with me. And I was like, oh, this guy is really trying to change our mindset. Really brings it back to the scarcity versus abundance. He really views that the world is abundant and there's tons of possibility out there. But if you're stuck in the old way of thinking, the scarcity mindset, you will never see the opportunity out there and you will never take it for yourself. You'll just believe that the abundance out there is for other people and you're not the right person to get it. And you didn't do this, you didn't do that. So you'll never be able to achieve it.
Yes. And, you brought up a really good point, and I kind of want to touch on this thing that you just said a little bit more. For your mom in particular, why was she bad at money?
She wanted more than she could earn. So she didn't understand, to me, the foundation of it all. And she really didn't want to work more for it. She didn't have the chops to be an entrepreneur or to be able to figure out, like how your mom did, figure out how to make more money to be able to get the things that she wanted in life. So she essentially does the same kind of job as my dad, but her desire grew way faster than her income. So she ran into a lot of issues with money. She would borrow from friends and family and wouldn't pay them back. And it especially I believe in Asian families, money gets really sensitive. Like if you always ask for money, you, as an Asian American, you kind of feel guilty that if you have enough for yourself, you have to give the rest away to the rest of your family. Yeah.
Or
and that
support somebody.
Yeah. And that kind of mindset, there is some charity you should have in your life. But if you end up just like paying for their lifestyle, they'll never learn to be able to earn the abundance for themselves. They're just learning that if they ask you, you'll give them money. You're enabling their bad habits. So that's my mom's side. And because of all that, I don't model my life around her. I took the foundation from my dad, and I like to say this to a lot of people, but I'm educated by the internet. I'm educated by YouTube. I'm educated by Reddit. I'm educated by forums. And I just taken all this information and kind of I created my own kind of like role model to follow. It's just this imaginary person that has all the qualities that I've kind of like piecemealed from various real people in the world that have achieved the things that I want to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we talk about like rich dad, poor dad, I don't necessarily mean it in the sense, and I know we talked about like I used 50K and like I was throwing out numbers and I was using that as an example, but I actually think you did grow up with the rich dad with your dad, because the thing in that book that I was talking about, the Robert Kiyosaki book, is that they're talking about in this abundance and mindset and scarcity mindset, there tends to be a two ways of thinking of how a person even thinks about money, right? For example, in the book, he talks a lot about having assets that give you income versus having just material goods that just kind of depreciate over time.
Like cars.
Cars are a big example. You buy a car, the minute you drive it off the lot, it loses value, right? Like, for example, a lot of people talk about owning stocks as an investment. That's where they spend their money because they want to get a return out of it. There's people who think this way, and then they're always thinking of how can I get an investment back for my money? And then there's people who just spend just to spend.
Yeah.
And I have to agree with you. You know, my dad was like your mom. Like they wanted things and they would get a check and then they wouldn't see how can I convert this money into more money.
Yeah.
They would see it as, okay, I have $2,000. Let me go buy something to make myself happy.
Yeah.
But then what they want would be above more than what they could afford.
Yeah.
And then they would find themselves constantly in debt. I remember my dad would constantly be asking my mom for money. And for those of you that don't know, my parents are actually not together now because I believe personally that money is a glue that holds a lot of relationships together. It's not the only thing, but it is a major part of especially people when they get married.
Yeah.
Like finances is life. Like you have to be able to handle these things if you want to live comfortably. And my dad could not do that. So it ended up giving him the life that he kind of regretted in a sense.
Yeah. In relationships, although money isn't everything, the way you view money kind of speaks to the type of person that you are. And if your mom was a certain way and your dad was the opposite, it's really apparent in how they viewed money. With your dad viewing money as not really a resource, it's like the only thing. Like you have to make money or else. And he would earn money and spend it. And I think this parallels with how we end up investing our money into our like careers, like into our entrepreneurship journeys. Back then, the concept of buying or like paying for a course or paying for anything to learn and become a better person, I was like, that's wild. I worked so hard for this money. I'd rather buy something nice for myself to reward myself. It's kind of like a short-sighted way of viewing things.
Yeah. And investments don't necessarily have to be like of monetary gain. It's like as you said, like education is one of them. Just being able to experiences is one of them because experiences can really shape the way you think.
Yeah.
In terms like giving you a fuller and richer life. Gifting, charity, like just acts of service. You know, these are things that can like really make you wealthy as a person. And when you're kind of stuck in that scarcity mindset,
You wouldn't spend on these things.
you wouldn't spend on anything. You don't want to, you don't use the part of your brain that wants to give out to the world. And you just become a type of person that tries to hold everything for themselves.
Yeah.
And you hold on to it like Scrooge from the Christmas Carol. Although he was rich, but he acted like he had no money, like being so stingy with his money. And I don't know. I mean, personally for me, like I feel that would not be a kind of life that I would want to live, because then I feel like I would be robbing myself of just like the beauty and the opportunity that the world can actually offer just by locking myself into that kind of mindset.
Yeah. And I believe a lot of parents do this. They say like, I could have done this. They speak as if it were regret, like there's a life they could have lived if they didn't have you. And I watched a few not podcasts, but there's TED Talks before podcasts were big a few years back. And this one person had TED Talks. They said that's like the worst thing you could say to a child. Like you're saying their very existence is the reason that you're unhappy. You can't blame the child for that. You actively chose to not follow the path that you really wanted to. And you used the child as an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Like your mom, she has 5 businesses. That is probably something that most moms don't do. As soon as they have a kid, they kind of like shift their mindset
For the kid.
Yeah, and just everything focused on the kid. And you see that with people who kind of like strive to be a stay-at-home mom. There's nothing wrong with that, but where it goes wrong is when you are a stay-at-home mom, but you have the minds in your head, you're wishing you were somewhere else, and you're using this as an excuse to kind of, you are fulfilling your own destiny. You want to be unhappy. You want to be the person who sacrificed for their kid, and you just make that true and you end up being unhappy because you kind of like willed that into existence, which goes along with the scarcity versus growth mindset thing. Because I believe that the mindset that you have really dictates how you feel about the world and the actions you take and inevitably your future. So if you have a scarcity mindset, you will only ever achieve the amount that you see in front of you. But if you have a abundance or growth mindset, you can expand and keep pushing and redefining your potential.
And that potential is different for everybody. This is not to say everybody's going to be the next Zuckerberg or everybody's going to, achieve $1 million. That's not what it's about. It's really about just realizing, being able to live in the present and saying, hey, I have like this life around me. What can I do with it? What are the opportunities around me that I can take advantage of that I'm not seeing? Just being able to kind of open your eyes and look forward rather than backwards really allows people to kind of uplift themselves from just being locked into a certain way of living. Because let's be honest, if we kind of fell into this trap of coasting, then why do anything? Like we live in a time period that is completely different. Like maybe, thousands of years ago was when we were farmers, right? You might have been locked into being a farmer, but now we live in the day of the internet where you can talk to somebody across the world instantly. Mm-hmm. You can connect with people from all walks of life. You can really create the life that you want for yourself. It doesn't mean that it's easy to do it, by no means, right? I get it. Some people have kids, some people have bills to pay, sickness. There's so many things that can just bog you down, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible.
Regarding having real constraints, being an adult, having kids, having families, having jobs, whatever, I was watching some of the late Jim Rohn's content recently, and he really emphasized just taking one step. You don't have to change your life in a day. Like Rome wasn't built in a day, and you're not just going to wake up one day and tell yourself, I'm going to build chairs for the rest of my life, or I'm going to become a painter. As if you haven't been doing that for the past few years, like just kind of take small steps, especially now it's January, it's the new year. A lot of people are making New Year's resolutions to kind of like lose weight. You don't go straight to a 6-pack. You don't go straight into working out like 2-a-days, or you don't go straight into like a 2-hour workout or like an hour run and then a half-hour sauna and then eating like quinoa, kale, and all this crazy stuff all at once. You take small steps, achievable steps that don't radically like shake your world. And that means like maybe eating an apple, or if you're on the path to become an entrepreneur, maybe create some content. Like Alan and I are both creators. Like Alan, we wanted to get back into photography, so you just started taking a few pictures again here and there, right? And over time, now you got that new Godox flash, right?
Yeah, just delve deep into a new flash system. You kind of resparked my love to take photos again in a different way. It was all just like a little slow process, one step at a time.
And those are the things you need to do. You just got to you got to see the opportunity in the world, and don't think it's all going to come to you at once. Don't think you're just going to make one viral video and then you're going to quit your job and you're going to be on the Ellen show or Oprah or whatever as the next hot thing. Just take small steps and see where you want to go. Imagine yourself as that person, even if it's not readily apparent, and take small steps toward it. So for me, I want to become a public speaker. I want to be able to motivate people. So I started doing Instagram stories, 15 seconds. I talk to mostly my high school and college friends. And I literally just like said, hey, I'm dealing with this. This is how I experience what my experience was, and this is what I learned from it. And then I did that over and over, and I got more comfortable in front of the camera. Then I was doing YouTube vlogs where I kind of integrated that, and then I wanted to reach a bigger audience on a more professional scale. So I started a podcast, and I do some podcasts where I just kind of speak freely, just let my mind flow and kind of just like express my thoughts and just share with others. And over time, I'm getting more comfortable speaking, kind of like building up my audience. And maybe one day I'll be able to speak in front of larger groups and perhaps get paid for it. But I will never reach that point unless I take these small little steps incrementally over time. And these projects of mine, like the Instagram stories, the YouTube vlogs, this podcast, they're not taking tons of time away from me. I'm just fitting them when I can. No one's telling me to do anything. I don't have to post every week. I don't have to post even twice a month if I can't. Just if I fall off the wagon, take a breather, come back the next week, and just keep going.
Yeah, and this is like a whole nother podcast topic in itself. If I were to even name it, I'd call it "There is no magic bullet," right? Because if you know anything about today's consumer society, everybody's always trying to sell you the quick fix, right? Diet pills, like how to get $1,000 in like one day or something,
or how to retire in like 2 or 3 years,
right?
You know what I'm talking about.
Like there's a whole market of people trying to sell you the quick fix, and I have this whole opinion about it, which I'm not going to get into. We'll talk about it some other time.
To pull it back to our original topic of this podcast is scarcity versus growth mindset. And my main takeaway is scarcity is the old way of thinking about things. Growth and abundance is a new way of thinking about things. And I believe that people should just be aware of both sides of the coin. You can cater your life and your journey and your destiny to the path that you choose. Don't just do what you're told. Be aware, be educated, and make the choice for yourself. If you want to have the 9 to 5 and be able to clock out at 5 and go see your kids or coach volleyball or soccer or whatever, all the power to you. But don't regret making that decision, making that choice, because you see everything else out there. If you want everything else out there, you have to take the steps and follow the crumbs to abundance, put in the hours, put in the work, and you will reap the benefits of the seeds that you sow.
And everything's just all trial, like there's no perfect way to do something. People will tell you and maybe even discourage you from trying to pursue things because maybe they are afraid to do it themselves. And I think there's just no excuse. There's pretty much the opportunity is out there. It's just whether or not a person wants to go and look for it. And it's almost kind of this self-awareness of what they want to. Sometimes if they want something quickly, it's not possible, right? But it doesn't mean that they can never get it. It just means that they might have to take a different approach to it. Building that tenacity, I think, is really important on just really creating perseverance for oneself. Because with a lot of trial, there can be a lot of error in whatever you're trying to do. And that can be discouraging. Like right now, I am learning how to budget my finances a lot better through one of my financial coaches. His name is Nick. A little shout out for him. Right now, he's helping me kind of just go through my entire budget for both my business and my personal spending. And I've been doing budgeting for years, but I actually paid a coach money because I realized that I want to be even better at it. And I want to lock down the process more. So I'm willing to invest my time and my money in order to make that happen. A few years ago, I wasn't willing to do stuff like that. Like paying for coaching, like I would have thought that was a waste of money. But by doing so, it's opened my eyes. He's given me new perspective, and I'm just going into this year much more confident than I would have been in previous years. So The investment opportunities are there. It's just whether or not you're willing to go and take it, and whether or not you even believe in them.
Yeah, so that's going to wrap it up for our discussion on scarcity versus growth and or abundance. This is Andy Nguyen, and thank you, Alan, for coming out to Irvine to kind of go into my studio, because kind of dragging all this stuff would have been a little bit of a hassle. But thank you, all of you, for tuning in to the Millennial Up Podcast. If you want to join our Facebook discussion group, it is Millennial Up on Facebook. The podcast, hopefully you're listening this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
And we'd love to be able to hear what topics you guys are also interested in, because in our generation, there's just so much to talk about. And this is one of the spaces that we can actually utilize to make it happen. So just feel free to join the group, comment, send an email, whatever it takes. We're all open ears.
Yeah, so thank you for tuning in. We'll be coming back maybe next week, hopefully next week. If not, 2 weeks, but we're going to get back on the train and follow our dreams.
We will be back.
All right, we're done.